I'm Amala Vance, and at 28, I found myself standing as an island of solitude at my own father's memorial service. Across the vast, sunlit room of the event center overlooking Pyagat Sound, my family gathered in tight clusters, their whispers reaching me like the chilling spray off the water. My brother, Julian, made his way toward me, his voice deliberately pitched to carry. "She's just here for the money," he announced to anyone within earshot. Dad was going to cut her off completely. The ripple of quiet laughter that followed felt like a physical blow, but it was nothing compared to the storm that was about to break. When the lawyer, Henry Jacobson, walked in holding a small USB drive, the tension in the room shifted. Suddenly, my father's face filled the large screen at the front of the room. The smug satisfaction on my family's faces began to curdle as they prepared to hear my father's final words. Growing up, my bond with my father, Richard Vance, was a thing of quiet magic. He was a titan in Seattle's tech world, having built his company, Vance Innovations, from a small startup he inherited into a global powerhouse. He was a relentless worker, often lost in the glow of a screen late into the night, but he always carved out time for me. I vividly remember our hikes in the Cascade Mountains when I was about 8. Dad would wake me before the sun had even touched the peaks, and we'd load our packs into the truck. "Amala," he'd say, using the special nickname he had for me. "The summit doesn't wait for late sleepers." During those quiet treks, surrounded by ancient pines and the crisp mountain air, he taught me about perseverance. Those were the moments I felt closest to him. "The world of innovation works a lot like climbing a mountain," he once told me as we rested on a rocky outcrop. "You have to know the trail, when to push forward, and when to rest. The biggest opportunities are just beyond the steepest climbs." Even as a child, I understood how much the company meant to him. It was his legacy, the culmination of his life's ambition. My brother, Julian, was 5 years my senior, and for as long as I can remember, he was locked in a one-sided competition for our father's approval. When I learned my first piece on the piano, Julian had to master a more complex one. When I got an A in a class, Julian needed an A+. Dad never seemed to register the toxic nature of this rivalry, or if he did, he chose to ignore it, perhaps believing it was a healthy sibling dynamic. "Your brother has a natural mind for this business," Dad would often remark when Julian brought up company strategy at the dinner table. The pride in his voice was a tangible thing. "He's going to take Vance Innovations to incredible new heights one day." The path forward was laid out for us from birth. Both Julian and I were expected to join the family business. Our futures were charted like a project timeline. We would both attend his alma mater, the University of Washington, for business and computer science degrees. Julian would spearhead development and operations, while I would manage marketing and user experience. It was a perfect plan. But music had already claimed my heart. My teachers praised my compositions, and in high school, I won several state-level competitions. While Julian was poring over tech journals and shadowing Dad at the office, I was lost in a world of musical scores and melodies, filling notebooks with compositions. The first real clash with my father erupted during my senior year of high school. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I chose Jalpkid over the University of Washington. Dad was baffled by my decision. "Music is a hobby, Amala, not a career," he argued during a tense confrontation in his home office. "The company is your future, its security. It's what we've been planning for years. It's what you've been planning, I shot back, my voice trembling. I was never part of that conversation. That night was a seismic shift in our family. Julian, ever the opportunist, cemented his role as the devoted son, the one who would never let our father down. "Don't worry, Dad," he announced at dinner while I stared at my plate in silence. "I'll make sure the Vance legacy thrives for another generation." After that, Dad grew more distant. Our mountain hikes ceased. Our conversations became clipped and formal. He still funded my education, a gesture for which I was profoundly grateful, but the warmth in our relationship had been extinguished. There were fleeting moments of connection. He flew to New York for my first collegiate recital, and I saw a flicker of pride in his eyes as he listened to my work. But those moments became vanishingly rare. Julian's manipulation was a mustaklas in subtlety. He meticulously crafted a narrative about me for the rest of our family. To our Uncle Walter and Aunt Pulla, to our cousins, and to Dad's colleagues, I was the ungrateful daughter who had spat on her father's legacy. Julian ensured everyone understood the depth of my betrayal. "She doesn't even call him anymore," I overheard Julian telling Uncle Walter at a family Christmas gathering during my sophomore year. The truth was, I had called just the week before, but Dad hadn't answered. When I confronted Julian about it later, he just shrugged. "I'm just calling it like I see it, sis. You made your choice." By the time I graduated from Jolpkid, the story was set in stone. Julian was the dedicated son, poised to inherit the throne. I was the outcast who had turned her back on her family. The most painful part was seeing that Dad was starting to believe it, too. My college years were a whirlwind of practice rooms, recitals, and part-time jobs. Despite the chasm between us, I continued my efforts to connect with Dad. I'd send him recordings of my compositions, hoping he'd hear that my choice wasn't a rejection of him, but an embrace of my own calling. During my junior year, I composed a suite inspired by the Seattle skyline, which I always thought of as Dad's skyline. I was ecstatic when a prestigious chamber music society selected it for performance. I sent Dad an invitation, praying that seeing my success might mend our fractured bond. "I'd love for you to come," I said over the phone. "The premiere is on Friday at 7 p.m. "I'll check my calendar," he replied, his voice wrapped in that formal tone that had become our new normal. Julian and I might be closing the deal on the new cloud services division that day. I swallowed my disappointment. "Well, there's another performance on Sunday, so maybe that would work." "Maybe," he said noncommittally. "I'll let you know." To my astonishment, Dad did show up, not for the premiere, but for the Sunday matinee. He came alone, without any warning. The usher recognized him from a photo I had on the program and brought him backstage afterward. "Your work is interesting," Dad said, studying the printed score I had left on a music stand. There was an unreadable quality in his voice. "You're clearly talented." It wasn't the warm praise I had dreamed of, but it was something. We had coffee afterward, and for a fleeting hour, it felt almost like old times. He asked about my classes and my plans after graduation. I asked about the business and his health. We navigated the conversation like two diplomats, carefully avoiding any topic that might lead to conflict. As we parted, he placed a hand awkwardly on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you for working hard, Amala," he said, "even if it's not the path I would have chosen for you." That single moment gave me a fragile hope. Perhaps, with time, he could fully accept my life. What I didn't realize then was that Julian was working tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure that day would never come. I would only uncover the full scope of his sabotage years later. After graduation, I moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career in film scoring. The distance stretched our already thin connection even further. I called on holidays and birthdays, but our conversations remained stilted and brief. Julian, meanwhile, was fully enmeshed in Vance Innovations. According to the family grapevine, he was Dad's right-hand man, a key player in every major decision. During a Thanksgiving visit back to Seattle, I noticed Dad seemed worn down. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his movements slower. "Are you feeling okay?" I asked him in a private moment. "Just getting old," he said with a dismissive wave. "Doctor says I need to watch my blood pressure, that's all." I later found out from Aunt Pulla that Dad had suffered a minor heart scare earlier that year. "Julian has been such a rock," she told me. "He's taken on so much extra work so your father can rest more." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating. While I was off chasing my selfish dreams, Julian was the selfless son holding down the fort. What Aunt Pulla didn't know, what none of us knew, was that Julian's support included acting as a gatekeeper for Dad's communications. Birthday cards I sent vanished. Voicemails I left were never returned. Invitations to my LA performances were mysteriously lost. As Dad's health declined, Julian's methods grew bolder. During my infrequent trips home, he would engineer situations to reinforce his narrative about me. He'd schedule critical business meetings on the days I was visiting, then feign disappointment when Dad chose work over spending time with me. "That's just how it is when you run a company, Amala," Julian would say with a mask of sympathy. "Some of us have responsibilities we can't just walk away from." 6 months before Dad died, I made one final attempt to bridge the gap. I had reached a major milestone. I had been hired to score a major studio film, and a prominent industry critic had praised my innovative sound. I called Dad, buzzing with excitement. The call was a disaster. He sounded distant, almost cold. When I told him about the film, he barely reacted. "That's nice," he said flatly. "By the way, Julian just secured the largest government contract in the company's history. The Citadel Project." I tried to express genuine happiness for the company, but Dad cut me off. "Look, Amala, I'm very busy. Vance Innovations requires my full attention. Not all of us have the luxury of pursuing hobbies." His words were a dagger. After years of relentless work and tangible achievements, he still saw my entire profession as a mere hobby. When I tried to explain how much my music meant to me, how it was my life's work, he sighed heavily. "I'm too tired for this conversation. Maybe we can talk another time." We never did. That was the last real conversation we ever had. I hung up the phone convinced our relationship was irreparable, that he would forever see me as the daughter who had disappointed him, the one who wasn't worth his time. I had no way of knowing that every word of that exchange had been orchestrated, not by my father, but by Julian, who had been methodically poisoning our connection for years. And I had no idea that Dad had discovered the truth. It was too late for us to reconcile in person, but not too late for him to set things right. I was in my LA apartment, preparing for a meeting with a film director, when the call came. It wasn't Julian or any other family member. It was Henry Jacobson, Dad's longtime friend and attorney. "Amala," Henry's voice was grave. I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but your father suffered a major heart attack last night. My hand clenched the phone. Is he okay? The silence that followed was more telling than any words. I'm so sorry, Amala. He passed away early this morning. Julian asked me to let you know. Julian asked Henry to call me. My own brother couldn't pick up the phone to tell me our father was gone. I sank onto my couch, the room tilting around me. When did it happen? I managed to ask. Around Zara a.m. he was at home. The housekeeper found him when she arrived this morning. I booked the first flight to Seattle, my hands shaking as I threw clothes into a suitcase. During the flight, I called Julian over and over. He finally answered on my fourth try. What is it, Amala? I'm dealing with a lot right now, he snapped. I'm on my way to Seattle, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Henry told me about Dad. Why didn't you call me? I've been busy making arrangements, he replied coldly. Someone had to step up. I would have helped if you'd called me right away. Julian scoffed. Right, like you've been so involved in Dad's life lately. Before I could form a response, he continued, Look, the memorial is on Friday at the Sundvia Event Center. Dad's body is already at the funeral home. Everything's taken care of. Friday? That's only 2 days away. Shouldn't we wait so people have time to? The arrangements have been made, Amala. Dad and I discussed his wishes years ago. Not that you would know anything about that. Every word was a carefully aimed dart. I took a deep breath. Where should I stay? Is the house? The house is full. Uncle Walter and Aunt Pulla are staying there. You should book a hotel. He paused. And Amala, there's a family gathering tomorrow night before the memorial. Immediate family only. The message was crystal clear. I was not welcome. When I landed in Seattle, I went directly to the funeral home. I needed to see him, to say goodbye without the judging eyes of my family. The director led me to a quiet room where Dad lay in a sleek, modern casket, looking unnervingly peaceful in his best suit. Hi, Dad, I whispered, tears finally breaking free and streaming down my face. I'm so sorry we didn't fix things. I stood there for what felt like an hour, talking to him, telling him everything I wished I could have shared if we'd had more time, if we hadn't let it all fall apart. That night, alone in my sterile hotel room, I called my best friend, Clay. They're having a family gathering tomorrow and didn't invite me, I told her, my voice cracking. That's monstrous, Amala, Clay said. Do you want me to fly up for the memorial? You shouldn't have to go through this alone. Her offer was a lifeline. Could you? I know it's asking a lot. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow, she promised. We'll get through this together. The day of the memorial arrived under a sky the color of slate. Clay and I got to the event center 30 minutes early, but the front rows were already occupied by family and business associates. Julian, seated front and center with Uncle Walter and Aunt Pulla, didn't even glance up as I walked in. We found seats near the middle. As more people filed in, I could feel their stares and hear the sibilant whispers. The narrative Julian had woven for years followed me like a shroud. The ungrateful daughter, the family disappointment, showing up only now that an inheritance was on the table. The service was elegant and formal, a reflection of my father. The speaker talked of Dad's innovations, his contributions to the city, his dedicated parenting, looking pointedly at Julian during this last part. When it was time for the eulogy, Julian walked to the podium with the easy confidence of a man who owned the stage. His speech painted a portrait of a father-son relationship that felt like pure fiction to me. He spoke of late-night coding sessions, of business strategies mapped out over breakfast, of Dad proudly watching him carry on the Vance legacy. "My father often said that family was everything," Julian declared, his voice thick with well-rehearsed emotion. "He believed in loyalty, in showing up for the people you love, in honoring your commitments." The subtext was a sledgehammer. Everyone in that room knew he was contrasting his own devotion with my perceived abandonment. "Some people," Julian continued, his eyes flicking in my direction, "choose to abandon their responsibilities, their family legacy. But Dad and I always understood the importance of staying true to your roots." I felt Chloe's hand tighten on mine as I fought to keep my composure. After the service, people gathered for a reception. A few of Dad's colleagues offered brief, awkward condolences. Aunt Pulla gave me a hug that was all bone and angles before quickly moving on. I was pouring a cup of coffee when Julian approached, flanked by two of our cousins. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, his voice low but carrying. "It must be nice to show up after years away and expect to be treated like family." "Julian, this isn't the time or place," I said, my voice shaking. "We're here to honor Dad." "Honor Dad," Julian laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Is that why you're here? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just here for the money. Dad's going to cut you off, you know." Heads turned. My face burned with humiliation. "You have no idea why I'm here." "Don't I?" Julian's smile was cruel. "You haven't cared about this family for years. You didn't care when Dad needed a stent. You didn't care when he was working himself into the ground to maintain the company that would have secured your future, too. You only care now that there might be something in it for you." People were openly staring now. I heard someone snicker. Uncle Walter came over, placing a hand on Julian's shoulder. "Perhaps Amala should just leave," he suggested, not even looking at me. "She's not really family anymore, is she?" The laughter that followed from several family members almost shattered me. I thought about walking out, about sparing myself any more of this agony. But something held me there. I owed it to Dad to see it through. "Despite everything, I'm staying," I said quietly. "Whether you like it or not, he was my father, too." Julian shrugged dramatically. "Suit yourself, but don't get your hopes up for tomorrow. Dad knew who really cared about him in the end." Tomorrow, the reading of the will. The thought hadn't even crossed my mind, but it was clearly at the forefront of everyone else's. In their eyes, it was the only possible reason for my return. As I walked away, I heard Julian's voice drift across the room. "She'll be singing a different tune tomorrow when she realizes Dad saw through her act years ago." If only I had known how right he was, though not in the way he imagined. The rest of the reception was a slow-motion nightmare. People I had known my whole life either dodged my gaze or offered condolences laced with poison. My father's business partner of 20 years, Kavan Sankla, spoke to me with such strained politeness, it was worse than open hostility. "Your father was a remarkable man," Kavan said, his eyes darting over my shoulder. "He built quite a legacy with Julian." "With Julian," I repeated numbly. "Right." "The company is in good hands now," he continued, finally meeting my gaze. "Your brother has your father's vision. The transition should be seamless." The message was unmistakable. I was an outsider, not part of the succession plan. I saw my cousin Clara, my childhood playmate, talking with a group of friends. When she saw me approach, she whispered something to the others before reluctantly detaching herself. "Amala," she said, her hug so quick it was barely there. "I'm sorry about Uncle Richard." "Thank you," I replied. "How have you been?" "Fine, busy." She glanced back at her friends. "Julian mentioned you're in LA now. Must be interesting." "It is. I'm building my career as a composer. I just finished scoring a film." "Oh, that's nice," Clara interrupted, her disinterest palpable. "Must be fun to follow your dreams while Julian's been here handling everything." She didn't even try to hide her judgment. "Excuse me, I should check on my husband." And she was gone. I stood alone again, an intruder at my own father's memorial. I found Clay by the large windows overlooking the gray water. "This is worse than I ever imagined," I whispered. "They all hate me." "They don't know you," Clay said firmly. "They only know the story Julian has fed them. You're here for your dad, not for them. Get through today and the will reading tomorrow. Then we can go back to LA." The will reading. My stomach clenched. If the memorial was this brutal, what fresh hell awaited me tomorrow? Based on Julian's swaggering confidence, I was about to be publicly disowned, the final, official stamp on my father's disappointment. I was lost in these dark thoughts when I heard Julian's voice again, intentionally loud. "I still can't believe she had the nerve to show up today," he was saying to Uncle Walter and two men I recognized as board members. "After how she broke Dad's heart, refusing to even visit when he was sick." A flash of anger cut through my grief. I hadn't known Dad was seriously ill. No one had told me. But before I could confront him, Julian continued. "Well, she's in for a surprise tomorrow," he said with a smirk. "Dad updated his will last year after she refused to come home for his birthday. He finally realized she didn't deserve any part of what he built." One of the board members saw me standing nearby and nudged Julian. He turned with a look of exaggerated surprise. "Oh, Amala, didn't see you there. We were just discussing tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer. You are planning to attend, aren't you?" His tone dripped with condescending hope that I would run away to avoid the humiliation he had orchestrated. "Of course I'll be there," I replied, my voice miraculously steady. Julian smiled, a cold, predatory glint in his eyes. "Excellent. It should be enlightening for everyone." Uncle Walter didn't bother to hide his disdain. "I don't know why you're bothering, Amala. Richard made his feelings quite clear while he was alive." "Did he?" I asked, a sliver of doubt piercing my resignation. "What exactly did he say?" "That's between him and the family members who actually stayed in touch," Walter shot back. "Maybe if you'd picked up the phone more often, you'd know." "I tried to stay in touch," I said, my face flushing with anger and shame. "It's not that simple." "Never is with you, is it?" Julian interjected. "Always an excuse, always someone else's fault. Dad got tired of it, Amala. He got tired of waiting for you to grow up." The confrontation had drawn a crowd. I felt dozens of eyes on me, judging, condemning. "You have no idea what my relationship with Dad was like," I said, my voice finally breaking. "I have every right," Julian cut in. "I was there every day. While you were off playing artist in LA, I was helping him run his company, taking him to doctor's appointments, being an actual son." The deliberate misgendering was a final, petty twist of the knife that elicited a few snickers. My humiliation was absolute. I stood there, fighting back tears as Julian smiled in triumph. "Face it, Amala. You're just here for the money. Dad's going to cut you off. Everyone here knows it. Tomorrow, we'll just make it official." I wanted to flee. Every instinct screamed at me to escape this room full of people who had so readily accepted Julian's lies. But leaving would only validate their beliefs. Despite the burning shame, I stood my ground. "I guess we'll all find out tomorrow, won't we?" I managed to say, before walking away with what little dignity I had left. Chloe found me in a small, deserted courtyard where I finally let the tears fall. "Those people are toxic," she said, sitting beside me. "Julian has them completely brainwashed." "Maybe he's right," I whispered, doubt seeping into my exhaustion. "Maybe I should have tried harder. Maybe I don't deserve anything." "That's ridiculous," Chloe said fiercely. "Your brother is a manipulative monster. Whatever happens tomorrow, you know your worth. Your father's money doesn't define you, Amala." She was right. But as we left the reception, I couldn't shake the feeling that the next day's reading would be the final verdict on my life, a public confirmation of my failure as a daughter. I had no idea that Dad had left a very different message for all of us. The next morning, the sky was still a uniform, oppressive gray. I dressed in a simple black dress, mentally bracing myself for the ordeal ahead. Chloe offered to come, but I knew I had to face this alone. "Call me the second it's over," she insisted as I left the hotel. "No matter what." I promised I would, fully expecting to make that call in tears. The will reading was to take place at the family's lakeside estate, a sprawling modern home that felt more like a corporate retreat than a residence. The detail felt like another twist of the knife. Henry Jacobson, Dad's lawyer and friend for over 30 years, would be the one to deliver the final blow. When I arrived, the great room was already filled. Julian sat at the head of the long mahogany table, playing the part of the new patriarch. Uncle Walter and Aunt Pulla were at his right, along with the company's CFO and 2 board members. The atmosphere was almost festive. The conversation stopped when I entered. "Amala, you actually came," Julian said with a theatrical flourish. He gestured to a single empty chair at the far end of the table. "We saved you a seat." The isolation was intentional. I took my place without a word, ignoring the renewed whispers. "I was just telling everyone about the Citadel project," Julian continued loudly. "The one Dad and I poured our hearts into during his final months. It's going to revolutionize the industry." The message was clear. This was a business discussion, and I was not part of it. I stayed silent, counting the seconds until it was over. At precisely ton, Zara AM, Henry Jacobson entered. Unlike the others, he greeted me with genuine warmth. "Amala, thank you for coming," he said, briefly squeezing my shoulder. "I'm very sorry about your father. He spoke of you often." That small kindness nearly undid me. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Henry placed his briefcase on the table. "Before we begin," he addressed the room, "Robert was not only my client but my dear friend. His loss is deeply felt." After a murmur of agreement, he continued. "Robert was meticulous in his planning. He left very specific instructions for how today was to proceed." Julian leaned forward. "We're all eager to respect Dad's wishes and move forward." Henry nodded, his expression unreadable. Robert's instructions are somewhat unconventional. He prepared a video statement to accompany the formal will. A wave of confusion went through the room. A video? Julian's confident mask slipped for a fraction of a second. He never mentioned that to me. Robert recorded it privately about 3 months ago, Henry explained. He was adamant it be viewed before the written provisions are discussed. I watched Julian. The swagger he'd worn all morning was gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine surprise and maybe even concern. "Well, let's get on with it then," Julian said, forcing a casual tone. "I'm sure Dad just wanted to add a personal touch." Henry nodded to his assistant, who set up a projector and screen. As the equipment was being arranged, the mood in the room shifted from celebratory to uncertain. I saw Julian whispering urgently to Uncle Walter, whose face grew grim. The lights dimmed. Henry inserted a USB drive into the laptop. A moment later, the screen lit up and there was my father. The sight of him, healthy, composed, alive, was a physical shock. He sat at his desk in his home office, looking directly into the camera as if he could see each of us. The room fell utterly silent. "Hello, everyone," Dad began, his voice so familiar it made my throat ache. "If you're watching this, then I'm no longer with you. I've asked Henry to share this message because there are truths that need to be spoken. Truths I regrettably didn't recognize until it was almost too late." He paused. "What I'm about to say will surprise many of you. It will upset some of you. But before I leave this world, I need to set the record straight." A strange feeling bloomed in my chest, not quite hope, but something close. His expression had softened, and for a moment I saw the dad from the mountain trails. "This is a message about truth," he said, "about family, about betrayal and forgiveness, and about second chances that come too late, but perhaps not too late to make things right. I want to begin by speaking directly to my daughter, Amala," Dad said, his eyes finding mine through the screen. "If you're here, and I hope with all my heart that you are, I need to say something I should have said in person. I'm sorry." A collective gasp went through the room. Julian sat frozen. "I'm sorry for the distance between us. I'm sorry for not supporting your dreams. Most of all, I'm sorry for believing lies about you that I should have questioned." Dad's face contorted with pain. "You see, I recently discovered something that has changed everything. About 6 months ago, after another minor heart episode, I began working from home more. One afternoon, I was looking for some documents in Julian's home office and found something disturbing. A folder in his desk drawer filled with unopened emails and unsent draft replies. "From you, Amala." I gasped. Heads swiveled from me to Julian, who had gone pale. "Birthday wishes I supposedly never received," Dad continued. "Invitations to your performances, links to your music. All of it intercepted, all of it hidden away, all deliberately kept from me." Julian shot to his feet. "This is ridiculous." Dad was confused after his heart. "Mr. Vance, please sit down," Henry interjected firmly. "Your father's instructions were explicit. The video must be played in its entirety without interruption." Julian sank back into his chair, his face crimson. On screen, Dad continued. "That discovery prompted me to investigate further. I hired a private investigator without Julian's knowledge. What I found was deeply troubling." Dad held up a folder. "The investigator confirmed that Julian had been rerouting your calls, deleting your voicemails, and actively sabotaging any attempt at communication between us." The room was deathly quiet. Tears streamed down my face. But that wasn't all, Dad said grimly. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing about the business. Julian has been engaging in practices that violate everything Vance Innovations stands for. He's been cutting corners on cybersecurity protocols, falsifying compliance reports, and in one case, paying off a regulator to approve a flawed software release. The board members exchanged horrified glances. "I built this company on integrity," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. "My father taught me that our name meant something. Julian betrayed those values for short-term profit." Julian was now openly sweating. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered. "Dad was confused the medication." "Mr. Vance," Henry warned again. On screen, Dad's expression softened. "When I found out, my first instinct was to call you. But I realized you deserved more than a phone call. I made arrangements to come to LA, to see your life, to meet you on your own terms." My heart clenched. I had planned to visit the week after that final call, the one where I was so cold. I was distant because I was furious, not at you, but at Julian and at myself for being so blind. I was planning to surprise you, to see your studio, to finally tell you how proud I am of you. He paused, overcome with emotion. "My heart had other plans, it seems, so this video will have to do." He picked up another folder. "I've been following your career, not through Julian's filtered reports, but through industry magazines and websites. I've seen your reviews. I've even had an intermediary purchase the rights to several of your early compositions." This revelation stunned me. Your creativity, your vision, your determination, these are qualities to be admired. I was wrong to try and force you into a box that didn't fit. You aren't just a talented composer, Amala. You're an entrepreneur in your own right, building something from nothing, just as I did. Dad sat up strutta. "Now, to the matter of my will. Given what I've discovered, I cannot in good conscience leave the company solely in Julian's hands. My original will has been revoked." The room was still. "To my son, Julian Vance, I leave a cash inheritance of $500,000 to be held in trust and distributed in annual payments of $50,000, contingent upon his cooperation with an ethics investigation and his completion of a business ethics program." Julian's face was a mask of disbelief. "What?" he whispered. "To my daughter, Amala Vance, I leave my personal residence, my personal investment portfolio, and 51% ownership of Vance Innovations." The room exploded. Uncle Walter shot up in protest before Henry motioned him back down. On screen, Dad continued calmly. "Amala's artistic vision and ethical foundation make her the ideal person to guide this company into the future. The remaining 49% will be distributed among the board and senior management. I have also established a foundation in my name to support young musicians, to be directed by Amala." He looked directly into the camera. "Son, I hope you understand this decision comes from love. The path you were on leads to ruin. My hope is this will guide you back to the values I try to teach you." Julian stood up, kicking his chair back. "This is insane. He was manipulated. I'll contest this." "I anticipated that," Dad's voice said from the screen. "Henry has comprehensive documentation of the investigation. Contesting the will would make all of this public, likely leading to criminal charges." Julian fell silent, his face a storm of fury. "Amala," Dad continued, his voice soft again, "I know this is an enormous responsibility. If you choose to sell your shares, I've made provisions for that, but I hope you'll consider it. This company could benefit from your fresh perspective." He paused, his eyes glistening. "More than anything, I wish we'd had the chance to reconcile, to go hiking again. I'm so sorry that won't happen." He looked at the camera one last time. "Family is complicated, business is complicated, but integrity isn't." Amala never lost hers. That's why, in the end, she is the right person to carry on the Vance legacy. A genuine, warm smile spread across his face. "I love you both. I hope this leads to healing." The screen went black. The silence was broken by Julian's harsh laugh. "You think this changes anything?" He snarled at me. "You know nothing about tech. The board will never accept you." He looked around for support, but everyone avoided his eyes. Henry cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess before we continue." Julian stormed out. Most of the others followed, casting uncertain glances my way. Only Henry remained. "Did you know?" I asked him quietly. He nodded. "Your father confided in me. He was heartbroken about the lost time. He was so proud of you, Amala. He kept a portfolio of articles about your work in his desk." The tears came again, but they were different now, grief mixed with vindication. "I wish I'd known." "So did he," Henry said gently. "But he believed you have the strength to handle this." As the others began to filter back in, I sat up straight, wiping my tears. The path ahead was daunting. But for the first time in years, I felt my father's love, not despite my choices, but because of them. And that made all the difference. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal briefings and emotional upheaval. Julian's legal challenge was short-lived. Faced with my father's mountain of evidence, he withdrew his contest and disappeared, reportedly on an extended trip to Europe. I felt a tangled mess of anger and pity for the brother I once knew. My first decision was to temporarily relocate to Seattle. The transition at Vance Innovations was rocky. Some loyal to Julian resigned, others viewed me with open skepticism. I faced it head-on. "I'm not a software engineer," I told the staff in my first company-wide meeting. "But I know my father's values. This company will be run with integrity, creativity, and respect." I immersed myself in the business, slowly earning the trust of the team. We overhauled the Citadel project, absorbing the costs to fix the security flaws. At the project launch 6 months later, I felt Dad's presence, a quiet approval of the difficult but correct choice. Gradually, the family started to reach out. My cousin Clara called first, her apology hesitant but sincere. Others followed. Some were genuinely remorseful, others were clearly motivated by a desire to stay connected to the family fortune. I welcomed the former and kept a polite distance from the latter. The most profound discovery came when I finally moved into my father's house. In his study, behind a hidden panel in a bookcase from our childhood games, I found his private collection. Not just my professional recordings, but old cassette tapes of my first compositions, programs from every recital, even my framed diploma from Gyalpked. Beside them was a leather journal. With trembling hands, I opened it. The entries chronicled his growing pride and his deepening suspicion of Julian. The final entries detailed his heartbreak and his plan. "The private investigator confirmed my worst fears today," he wrote 3 months before he died. "Jason has been systematically keeping Amala from me. How could I have been so blind? I need to fix this. I'm planning a trip to LA next month. I only hope it's not too late." Tears streamed down my face as I read his last entry, dated just days before his heart attack. Made arrangements for LA. Haven't felt this hopeful in years. Also met with Henry to change the will. If something happens before I can see Amala, at least she'll know the truth. At least she'll know I loved her and recognized her strength. These discoveries were a balm on a decade-old wound. I couldn't get the years back, but I could honor his memory. 6 months after taking over, I launched the Richard Vance Foundation for Young Musicians, using company profits to fund music programs in Seattle's schools. At the inaugural event, I stood before a crowd of tech leaders and artists, feeling the two halves of my life finally merge. My father taught me that integrity is non-negotiable, I told them, and that sometimes the most valuable perspective comes from seeing things differently. That's what art does. It challenges us to see the world through new eyes. After the speeches, Henry approached me. "Your father would be incredibly proud," he said. "You've honored both his legacy and your own vision." "I wish he could see it," I replied, the familiar ache returning. "In a way, I think he did," Henry said thoughtfully. "That's why he made the choice he did." The next morning, I visited Dad's grave. I sat beside the headstone in the quiet cemetery. "I'm trying, Dad," I said softly. "I found your journal. I know you were proud. That means everything." I told him about the company, my music, and the unexpected joy of bringing those worlds together. As I spoke, a sense of peace settled over me. Something broken had been mended. Life is now a complex dance between boardrooms and composing studios. Some days are overwhelming, but others bring a profound sense of purpose. My father and I lost years we can never reclaim, but in his final act, he gave me more than a company. He gave me the knowledge that he saw me, truly saw me, and loved me for exactly who I was.